Hey, it's Jess, and welcome to The Heart Strong, a podcast where we explore navigating the challenges in our lives. It's my personal mission to guide you towards your greatest potential. So come along with me as we explore living with courage, or as I put it, living heart strong. On today's podcast, I'm sitting down with my friend Kelly, who is a lifestyle photographer specializing in high school senior, professional branding, and fine art intimate portrait photography. Kelly's passion for photography became the strongest when her oldest daughter, Livia, was diagnosed with a terminal genetic condition. Today, we're going to talk about the intersection of grief and creativity, how creativity and entrepreneurship can be a portal through our grief and also a place where we can come to know ourselves. I want to tell you real quick how I met Kelly. I met her because I was hosting a retreat for grieving mothers, and she came to the retreat. And what stood out to me about Kelly was that she was open and curious. Like, she really wanted to find gifts in her really, really difficult story. And she also wanted to find herself. And knowing her as I do, I feel like she's been on this self-discovery journey along with her entrepreneurial journey over the last several years. So I'm really excited for you to learn from her today. I also want to tell you that she's done nearly all my brand photography for me personally and a lot of things for the foundation and the Heart Shop. So you've definitely seen her work if you follow me. And in the process, we've become friends. And I am so excited to have you here today. Kelly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jess.
Yeah, I'm excited. I feel like this is going to be a really organic conversation. I think you have a lot of things to teach people. And so I'm excited for them to learn from you.
Thank you.
So let's start where this all began. Take us back to the days when you were caring for Livia, who's your oldest, and Finley, who's your second daughter. And when did the passion for photography begin? And what did that look like in your life at that time?
Sure. So, Livia was diagnosed when she was just about 2 years old. And when we received the diagnosis of terminal, it wasn't right away, but it was shortly thereafter. I knew that I was going to have to find ways to keep her with me forever. And that for me was photography. And so, in the very beginning, I didn't necessarily think or have the desire to create a business. It was much longer into my journey that kind of felt very like I felt the passion for that. So in the beginning, it was just I wanted to capture everything that I could about her. And of course, I had a very old cell phone that I was taking as many photos of her as possible. And then I was like, you know what? I need something a little bit better. And so it was the December after her diagnosis that it was my birthday and Christmas are right next to each other. So it was one of those that I received my first camera that you could take a lens on and off of. And so I thought it was like the best thing ever. And so I just started taking as many photos of her as I could. And I started writing a blog and sharing kind of our story. And so people not only read my words, but were able to see the things that I was capturing and just started taking notice and saying, hey, you're pretty good at that. Would you maybe take our family photos? And I was like, oh, like this is interesting. I really like this. So that's kind of how it started.
So you didn't necessarily know this was one of your gifts. Like, you kind of fell into it, would you say? Because you were loving your daughter and trying to live out your story. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've always considered myself a very creative person. I come from a long line of creatives, as far as, my great grandma was a quilter as well as my grandma, and my mom definitely has her artistic desires as well. And so I just feel like I've always had that creative personality trait within myself. And so this was a way for me to really bring that out.
Hmm. I love that. So let's go back to, if you can remember back to those caregiving days when you were in the throes of taking care of a little girl who was sick and who had a lot of needs and trying to take care of the rest of your family too. Did you have moments where you were like, I just this longing to create? What did it feel like for you in those moments? And I guess now that you can look back on them, like, do you have any perspective on that?
Sure. I definitely can remember having this desire to create and to do more. I can vividly remember spending a lot of hours on my couch with her. I mean, she did go to school for many,
Mm,
for most of the years of her life. And so I was able to pour a lot of learning during those times, but there was also a lot of time where she was home. And so, um, but Livia was always very laid back and,
mm,
um, it wasn't like she took me away a lot in the sense that, um, she was crying or hurting. It was, things were interrupted because of caregiving tasks.
mhm,
And um, so I can vividly remember spending a lot of time on my couch, teaching myself things because I am fully self-taught in photography. And so, I would spend a lot of time learning. I would spend a lot of time learning how to put a blog together, and I would have those moments of interruption, and that would absolutely be frustrating. But I also, she and Finley were my and are my muse, and so
mhm,
I used them to help me learn. And so I was able to bring them into my learning process, which was
mhm,
very helpful. But yes, I mean, being interrupted is definitely frustrating. And I did have that longing of, gosh, I want to complete something, or I want to watch this video, like from start to finish without interruptions. But the fact of the matter was that didn't always happen. And looking back on that now, I just feel like that helped create more of a resilience in myself, in that I had to focus on what was right in front of me. And that was, of course, caring for my children. And then I could go back to the things that I also desired. So it was kind of like a little give and take.
mhm.
And I did that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I just heard in you that think is really cool is that you did it little by little, like, you were self-taught, you didn't because so much in our culture today is like this, take this course and be this, this or that, and it's like we want this fast fix, but there's something about being consistent and committing to something and just slowly and then, like, look where you are now. I just think that's a really important thing for people listening to think about is just that continuously giving into something that you desire and hope for amidst your life. I think a lot of women can relate to that, and not to give up on it because you didn't, and you've created, like, something so beautiful. So, after Olivia died, how did it like, where did you make the transition? Because I think this is something where a lot of women that I know of and have talked to, or even people transitioning out of different stages of their life struggle with, is like, how do you go from this to that? What was that process like for you, and what did it feel like?
Sure. So, as her life progressed and her needs became more and more, and we knew for the majority of her life that her life was going to be short, and
Mhm,
so I always knew that there was going to be an after, and so I planned for that after, knowing that if I didn't have a plan and I didn't have a focus, what was I going to do with my life? And
mhm,
so it was while she was still alive that I made the decision, I'm going to take this passion that has been, presented to me because of my daughter, and I'm going to create something with that. And so in 2016, I became a taxpayer. So
mm,
I knew that I was going to take this towards a business. She passed away in 2017, and I didn't officially launch my business until what would have been her 11th birthday in
Mm.
2018. So, I made it a business, but then I sat with it. I didn't
Mhm.
really publicly announce it until it felt right. And so it was, again, being patient with myself, being patient with the process, in that I know I'm going to have this and I'm creating this as she's still with me. And then she died, and it didn't feel right for me right away to put it out into the world. And so I waited and officially launched then on her 11th birthday.
And how did it feel to launch that business? Like, because in your story, you knew that that was something that you would do one day, and I'm sure you longed for it at certain points
Mhm.
in the process, but you probably also knew that by longing for that, something, Livia wouldn't physically be with you, and that's like a hard. How did you kind of deal with that sort of, place? Because I think that that is like we have these longings, or even, I mean, I'm going to take it down to even really just to motherhood, where we say we have these dreams, but it means that our kids are no longer living in our house, or, it's like we're exchanging, and that's a very, but we're exchanging something for something else. And like, how did that feel? What did you do with those thoughts? I guess, how did you process through that?
Sure. So it definitely was a process. And I think that that's something unique to everyone.
Yeah.
You're going to see some people who have lost someone very important to them and jump right into whatever that might be. And that's
Mhm.
okay. But for me, it really took some time, just because I really lost myself when she died.
Mhm.
Um, I lost what I knew. I
Mhm.
lost who I thought I was. And that's a little bit of my story, of not necessarily a bad thing, just a learning process. But, and also grief took a toll on my body and my
Yeah.
mental health, which is very, you know, I think something you hear a lot of, but I really lost the ability to focus. That was my main struggle, is that I just could not focus on what was right in front of me. And so it took me some time, to kind of rest and heal myself, by keeping to myself. That's kind of how I rejuvenate, is by keeping
Mhm.
to myself. And so, um, having that time to also process, okay, where am I going to take this business and what I've created? And really, I settled on, this business was birthed because of her, and it's a way for me to bring her along with
Mhm.
me for the rest of my life. I mean, she's always going to be a part of me, and the pictures that I have of her and that are all over my house, of course, help me to remember her. But this business, the people that I get to meet when I interact with clients or customers, and I have the opportunity to say why I started my business, it's a way for me to bring her along. And so that really helped me, um, in my healing and in my, okay, this is where we're going, is knowing that she's coming along with me in this creation.
Yeah, so it's you're not ever leaving, we don't leave them behind, we bring them with us.
Right.
And, you talked a little bit about I wanna talk a little bit about identity, because I think that when we're in a caregiving role, that it's so easy for that to become our full identity, and how it's kind of inevitable in some ways, because it's like you said, it was like moment to moment. There was all these caregiving tasks to do, and then you said you felt like you lost yourself. Can you share a little bit about that process? Because I think, I mean, I've experienced that myself, and I think it's an ongoing self-discovery. What what was that like for you? And everybody's experience is different, but for you to go through that, what was that losing yourself, and what was finding yourself, or, maybe we're all still finding ourselves in some level, but what was that like for you?
Sure. Um, I always knew for the majority of my life that I wanted to be a mother. There was
Mhm.
never a doubt in my mind that I wanted to kind of follow that natural order of life, in what I viewed as a
Mhm.
natural order of life, and that is to get married, to have a family, to raise my children, to be contributing members of our society, and that they can leave the home and then find their own path. And so for me, when that didn't happen, when that natural order didn't occur, I really felt like I lost my identity, because I was really good at taking care of my kids, and I still am very good. And that's something that through this painful experience, I'm able to reflect on, and to know that that was one of my strengths, in that I'm really good at caring for others. But that is also something I'm able to carry into my business, is that I'm good at caring for others. And so even though I felt like I lost a lot of that identity, in that I was Livia's mom, that's how people knew of me, because we became very public about
Mhm.
Livia and what we were experiencing. And that was very uncomfortable for me in the beginning, but it's really helped position me in a way in my life that I'm able to interact with others, I feel like, in such a beautiful way. But my identity was definitely challenged, and I had to honestly relearn myself while Livia was alive, because I didn't know what I was capable of until I had her, especially in, what we were dealing with, but also the identity of myself in the after.
Mm. Yeah. And, people say things like, well, I could never do what you've done, or I don't know how you do it. What do you say to that in your mind, I guess? How do you think of that? I guess I want to say that that's a very natural comment, because people look at someone, for example, like in your shoes or in my shoes sometimes, like, oh, I don't know how they do it. But what do you think about that statement?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely heard that quite a few times. And, I try to be very gracious with other people when they say that to me, because we don't know what we don't know.
That's
And
right.
I feel like, people do say that in all kindness. Um, but honestly, like, I didn't know either. And so, until you're faced with something really, really hard, you don't know what you're capable of. And I think it's having the heart strength, and the focus and the belief in yourself that, gosh, if I am faced with something, what am I going to choose to do? Am I going to choose to stand up you know, and do this hard thing with grace and dignity? Or am I going to just let it defeat me, and I'm going to not continue living my life? And
Mhm.
so it's, you've got to have a belief in yourself. And it's hard to have that belief when maybe you haven't been faced with something really hard.
Mhm. And I think the message is also that we can do hard things, and we are capable of so much more than we think that we can be. I know that that's something that I've learned, and so I think that's something for people listening to remember too. You are capable of whatever comes your way. And Kelly, you're certainly like a standing testament to that for sure. So, you know, as a creator and as a person that has a lot of dreams, a lot of your creativity, like you just said, has come out of your love for Livia and your love for your family. And I was thinking about this as I was prepping for this. Like, some of our greatest cultural riches are a byproduct of grief. I mean, think about art and books and dance and brands and businesses and athletics and, feats that athletes complete. I mean, so much of it is an outpouring or an outcome of grief in the most beautiful way. It's like that deep hurt is also a portal to like amazing creation. And so I also think that message becomes like to deeply embrace the soul crushing sadness that we have, which is not something that our culture tells us to do necessarily. It's like we love the outcome of it, we love the beautiful art, but we didn't see that person like in the corner on the bathroom floor before that, but we see the outcome. So what do you say to that idea?
Oh gosh, that's a really great question. And I do feel like I am a living testament to that, in
Mhm.
that, you know, grief for me has highlighted such intimate, fine details of life itself. And having Livia and enjoying her for the days that she was here, but knowing that she wasn't going to be here, I think just created this awareness for myself, in that I'm able to see such, and I feel like others too who have experienced this deep, deep grief and sadness are just able to have a different observation of what's around them, including just your own life. I mean, the fact that we're sitting here breathing and talking to one another truly is something magnificent. And so I think when you have that awareness of the gifts, the smallest, tiniest little gifts, that it really does, it just magnifies everything.
It's like the gratitude in the
Mhm.
midst of it. I mean, there are some days when I think we have to say, I'm thankful that I have a roof over my head and food in my fridge because things are really hard and we just have to really go down to that basic level. But then there's other days when we just can recognize like the beauty of this moment that you and I get to sit here together and have this conversation, that you have done so much amazing personal work that you can sit and talk to me about this. I mean, there's so many gifts in all of it. And I think I know even for myself, like we miss out on those things. It's such an important thing to like remind ourselves about that. You know, I was also doing some research about this. I was thinking about the brain, like how does the brain work in the sense of grief? Because I think neuroscience is a very interesting component to a lot of things when it comes to our behaviors and things that we experience. And so, what I found, and this is really interesting, is that you have, two parts of the brain, the left and the right parts of the brain. And the left hemisphere focuses on positive things like, hope and joy and enjoyment. And the right hemisphere dispenses emotions like our anxiety. And so when we go through grief, I think this was really interesting. It wasn't that the left hemisphere stopped working with the joy and the hope. It's that the right hemisphere was overreacting anxiety and grief. So it wasn't like the left side wasn't activating joy and hope still, but it's just that the right side was overreacting in grief and anxiety. And I think that's really interesting to say that even though we're going through really hard times, even our bodies, our brains are holding on to some joy and hope. It's just a little quieter.
Mhm.
And I just from my own experience in witnessing a lot of people, it's like there are these deep valleys of grief, but then there's like this creative burst that comes. It's almost like that left hemisphere, like, you know, gives a little burst and the right one and the balance maybe comes a little bit. And so like what was that like for you? What helped to reactivate your creativity in your own self? Like how did that feel when you're like, I think maybe I can take a step towards my creativity, towards my photography or, whatever else you kind of felt called to at that time?
Sure. Well, this definitely brings up a couple thoughts for me. First, I'm kind of avoiding your question here, but I just have to say, like, I feel like this is such a perfect example of how we are to experience and live with joy and sorrow, and grief and sadness and joy and happiness, and how having this awareness of like learning to live with the both,
Yeah.
and is really like, whether you've gone through something tragic or not, it's it's really how we should be living our life, is that there's room for joy and there's room for sorrow, and when you give space for both of those things, it brings such harmony to life, because it's not like you have to push away that grief. Like, don't push it away, embrace it, because when you embrace it and you live through that and find ways to cope with those feelings, that's when I feel like all of this, like, you kind of arise, like you just come out of like this deep darkness, and this beautiful light just comes right into your life. And so I just had to bring attention to that
I
because
love that observation. I think that's so true. It's almost like our bodies manifest this. It's like we talk about holding space for both, but it's like our bodies are actually physically doing it. Isn't that interesting?
it is so interesting. And I just think it's such a great illustration.
It is.
So I'm glad that you brought that to my attention too. But then, as far as my, like, how did I like reactivate that creativity? That was your question, right?
Yes, it was. Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
um so I just feel like I reactivated my creativity when I started giving myself permission to kind of reevaluate my identity, who I was, and what I could offer other people. And it was through my experience, it was through, you know, through what I was, that deep valley of sadness, and kind of coming out of that, not ever leaving it, because it never ever leaves. But then just kind of taking a step back and looking at who I am, and what I experienced and what I can offer others.
Yeah. So it's like kind of bringing them together once again, right? Learning to live with both and letting that grief also be fuel, which we talked about before, and of all the things that in the world that are created out of it, it is a fuel. I mean, it truly can be in our lives. All right, let's shift topics a little bit and talk about entrepreneurship and business development, which is something that you and I have talked about offline a lot together. I'm curious how you approach your business or building your business alongside your story. Is there any way that you feel like there's like a secret sauce in Kelly, in the way that you're approaching building your photography business in light of your life experience?
Yeah, so it goes back a little bit to what I was talking about earlier with that identity process, in which before I was a mom, I had this certain identity of what I thought life was going to be like. And then having Livia and going through what we went through, my identity shifted again. And so then this after, it's almost been a multiple shift in identities, of really getting honest with myself about the things that I desire and what I can offer, and who I am as a person, that has really helped me focus on building a business and a brand that I'm proud of, and something that I'm excited to share with other people. But it's taken me just years of experience, years of um, just taking the time that I need to go through what I need in order to heal and to get really honest with myself.
Yeah, and the point is, like, what I'm hearing from you is like this is a process. Like it's not it's a process. And what I love and what I'm hearing from you is like you gave yourself and you are giving yourself time to continuously go through this process of your life. And we're always evolving and we're always changing, and you're giving yourself permission to do that in the process is what I'm hearing from you. And I love that, because if anyone's listening and you've gone through or you are going through a really difficult valley of grief, like there is light for you. So Kelly's definitely showing you that. But it's okay to be in the process. It's okay to go through these different iterations of yourself and to continue to find your identity and to know that it's going to change as time continues to march on. And I just wanted to bring that out because I think it's like we don't all have this conversation enough about the years of process that we go through. People see, the event, and they see when we really figure it out. But the reality is that the most of the time is that we're in process, and then that we're continuously giving ourselves permission to change and
Mhm.
to and as we grow. And I think that's like and I have experienced that, and I feel like am always ongoing and going through that because we should, right? We should be continuous. And I think that's something that our kids have taught us is that there is such value in this deep personal growth and understanding of ourselves.
Mhm.
Um, so like how let's talk a little bit about that process. Like how have you shifted over these last 5, 6 years? Like, if you could look back at the Kelly that you were in, let's just say early 2018 to
Mhm.
the Kelly that you are today, what would be something that you would tell that Kelly?
Sure. I think something I would tell her is um, not to forget about herself.
Mm,
Um, I do not regret 1 second of what I was able to experience during Livia's life. Not at all. I feel like I was really good at it. I feel like it was, her life was my greatest teacher, and it still is. But in a way, I almost forgot about myself. But that's okay because I was doing what I had to do during that phase of my life. My attention was where it needed to be. I was able to start cultivating something that was also important to me. But I kind of had to give up a part of myself for that, and that's okay. But I think if I was able to talk to the Kelly then, I would just remind her that she doesn't have to fully forget who she is and what she loves and what she desires, um, but that she's going to learn. She's going to learn so very much, and to just be patient during those times of okay, what's next, what's going to happen next, what's coming next, is to be like just more patient
mm.
with that process.
And with yourself, would you say too?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I wanted to ask you about self esteem because you mentioned something to me once about like kind of femininity after loss, like refining yourself as a woman. And you mentioned just before, like kind of losing yourself. And I think the other thing that is not talked about enough is the self-esteem challenges that women face who are raising and caregiving, raising kids with illnesses, with chronic complex illnesses and who have had to give up so much of themselves. And I know for myself, there are times when I feel like, well, something's wrong with me because my kids are sick. Like,
Hmm.
what did I do wrong? Um, and so when we start saying those messages to ourselves, it's pretty tough, And so I'm just wondering if you can talk to that idea of self-esteem and femininity and womanhood as you've gone through, this process of raising your daughter and grieving her and beginning again. What has that felt like to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, um, I have always, in a way, struggled with self esteem. Just making sure that everyone around me is happy. And a part of that is kind of complying with whatever's going on around me. And um, I don't necessarily feel that way anymore. I think because of this self discovery process that I've been on. But as far as my own femininity and motherhood, it definitely was challenged. Just having this preconceived idea of what a mother should look like and what a mother should be able to accomplish, and having that not necessarily conform into that mold that our society kind of has created. I really struggled with like the default that I had within myself, and it was very devastating. And it was again just I wasn't able to really focus on me at all. And I lost a lot of that, what it felt like to be a woman, what it felt like to be feminine and to be a mother was just, it was kind of wrecked for me
Mm-hmm.
when we received this devastating diagnosis. And so, um, this process of self exploration and self discovery has really been a beautiful healing aspect to myself. And like I said, I wouldn't trade I of course would never want this for Livia or what had happened to her. But, it's just been a pretty amazing exploration of who I am as a person and just allowing myself the time and the space to get to know myself, including Livia's mom, including who I was before that and now who I am, and growing into that person now.
I wonder, I'm sitting here as a mother who's still in the throes of caregiving for a sick child, and I'm wondering how we could do this differently because I hear this from so many women. It's like we lose ourselves. There's no room for me. And that's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately is like there's something that has to change in that. I think there's a lot of layers to that. There's the way that education is set up, healthcare is set up, like none of it is really ever thinks about the person who's actually providing the care and the love. It's like we're just always thinking about the kid with the illness and it's so I just think it's an important thing that I just want to say. I don't have a solution for it, but I see this in so many women and I think that for so long I felt like well, I'm just supposed to raise my kids and go to all the doctor's appointments and I do those things. But lately I kind of am like interested in a t-shirt that says I'm a person too,
Yep.
because I think we have to talk about and advocate for the development of our full identity as women and as mothers, acknowledging that having these children is difficult, but it's also incredible and it makes us who we are and it makes us wild advocates, compassionate souls, great creators, like all the things that we talked about, the amazing things that come out of grief. Like so many women are walking around with that inside of themselves, but are not being given the opportunities to bring that to life. And so that's one thing I hope comes out of this a little bit is that mothers and women and even fathers or other people say, I'm allowed to be who I am. I'm allowed to cultivate some of my gifts. And what I'm doing is incredibly challenging and incredibly amazing. And that I'm going to do something awesome with this because I get to see the world in a way that so many other people miss out on. And
Absolutely.
and I think you do that like in the lens of your camera. Like you see angles that other people aren't going to see. And how amazing is that? Because you're harnessing that. And so we all get to do that in some creative way. And it's like I want all people listening to feel like they can do that too. And so I think it's something that we have to shift or maybe talk more about. I don't what do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I just feel like having the giving yourself permission to recognize what you're going through, and that if you have these deep desires to do more, to do something else, to hold on to that, because what you're going through now is just going to help you dive into those desires, with more passion, with more eyes wide open experiences. And I just feel like time, it unfolds at the exact time that it's supposed to. And so to be really patient with yourself, but also allow yourself some time to recognize what you're doing and to have brave conversations just like this to help bring to light. Like I've made it 5 years after the death of my daughter, and I'm on the other side, still growing, still learning,
Mhm.
still finding my identity. And that's going to happen for other people too. But it's also like you can still give yourself permission to recognize, okay, this is what I desire, this is what I'm doing, and still do the things that you need to focus on right now, today, and keep moving forward.
moving forward. It's like the brain, right? Holding both of them in tension, not saying not ign I mean, they both are there right in front of us. They're both within us, and so it's kinda giving each of them some attention at different times. Um, I also think one of the other gifts that you and I both have is that time is precious and our lives are gifts. And that I know for me, it's like I want to suck the best parts of it out that I can and learn all that I can and be as impactful as I can. And that comes in harnessing our stories and just embracing like what's in front of us, even when it's something that we maybe don't particularly like. It's like because we're going through this amazing earth school really of learning. And so what do you say to that idea that time is precious? Because I know that you know that it is. And how has that, colored the way that you live your life?
Okay, so there's a quote by Picasso that says the meaning of life is to find your gift and the purpose of life is to give that away. And so I feel like that recognizing that again takes time. It takes time to recognize the hard thing that's right in front of you might be that gift that you're looking
Mm.
for. And so um
Like it's the birthplace,
mhm,
right? Like it
yeah,
could be that.
it absolutely could be the gift or the birthplace of that. And I just find that um time really is a thief, and
Mhm.
it's precious. Like we just really need to embrace our deepest desires because we don't want to get to a point one day and say, why didn't I? Like just try, just give it your all, and if you have that deep desire, then just go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Go for it. So this season, I'm focusing this podcast on who we become and what we create from the heartaches we witness and the adversities that we face ourselves. And so I have been asking all of my guests this question sort of at the end of the podcast is what do you really love about yourself? What do you love about Kelly? What's more beautiful about Kelly because of the challenges that you've gone through? And I know you've shared a few things here, but is there something else that you would love to share about that?
um So I think what's beautiful about myself is that I recognize how good I am at caring for others. And I feel like being able to admit that it helps carry into my business because I am involved in the business of people. And so being around other people and hearing their stories is such a beautiful gift and something that I long for and I feel does help me with my creativity because I learn so much from other people. And so I feel like that is one thing that's beautiful about me. I also feel like, I've had to face my biggest fear. And I recognize that as a family, we were able to move through that with such strength and dignity and courage. And I recognize the courage that it's taken for me to do that and to honor my life as well with that.
Mm, I love that. That's beautiful. Well, Kelly, you are certainly a teacher, and I know that people who listen to this podcast and this episode are going to learn so much from you and be so inspired by you, and hopefully think a little bit differently, maybe about their own story. And so, I just want to thank you for sharing this time with me. You're a beautiful person inside and out, and I am really thankful that you're in my life.
Well, I feel the same about you, and thank you for inviting me along. And it's a true joy to know you and your family.
Oh, and real quickly, where can people find you if they want to follow along or have you come take their pictures?
Sure. So I love Instagram. I'm mostly on Instagram, and you can find me at Direction Photography by Kelly. I also have a Facebook and website, same Direction Photography by Kelly. I would love the opportunity to work with anyone who chooses me.
Awesome. All right. We'll link those in the show notes. Thanks again, Kel. Have a great day. Thank you for joining me here on the Heartstrong podcast. Please rate and review this podcast and share an episode that you love with a friend, because when you do, you help us grow our mission of encouraging people to grow through the challenges of their lives and to live their full potential. We'll see you next time.